Right, so in this final video we're going to be looking at, and I suppose this is the most crucial video of the week. We're going to be looking at what's taken to be, if not the most important objection to presentism, it's of equal importance. It's often taken, or it's taken by many to be absolutely decisive against presentism. So some people think that we can, despite all the objections to the other that we looked at last week, to other A-theory views, they think that this one at the very least rules out presentism as being a viable option. That's what many people think, and at the very least it forces presentists into an uncomfortable position. They have to think of a way of responding to it, and this is it's a famous, much discussed Truthmaker objection. Okay, so what is the Truthmaker objection? Well, first of all, we're going to have to say what's a truthmaker. So this is thought to be, we'll just call it the Truthmaker principle. I'll just put TP. And the Truthmaker principle is taken by many to be a fundamental metaphysical principle. And we can put it like this. All true sentences are made true by what exists in reality. There are lots of different ways, or what exists, let's put simpliciter. Let's just put that. All true sentences are made true by what exists simpliciter. So okay, the thought behind the Truthmaker principle then is that we can't have free-floating truths. We can't have a sentence being true if it got no connection to ontological reality, what exists, what there is. And we can consider this in terms of something like, I think in the book, when I wrote the book, it was Obama was president. Trump's still president at the moment, so we'll use Trump, or should we use Boris? Oh, come on, let's use Boris. So we can say, Boris Johnson is PM. And there, right, it's thought, well, okay, that's a true sentence. The sentence is just a written series of marks on, in this case, a screen. But we want to say it's true. And to say that it's true, we have to give some sort of a semantic account of how the sentence functions. How does this sentence get to be true? And the standard account is, to say, well, this is a referring term. It refers to a particular man in reality. This refers to the property of being Prime Minister. And this sentence is true because this man, in fact, has this property, right? I mean, it doesn't matter about the account of this, but the point is meant to be, look, what makes this sentence true is the fact that there is a real flesh and blood person out there, Boris Johnson, who possesses the property of being Prime Minister. So, there we go. And the thought is, there is no sentence about reality which is true, which doesn't have some sort of ontological grounding. There's not, how can sentences be true if there's nothing out there in reality to ground it? So sometimes this is put in terms of grounding. All true sentences are grounded by what exists simpliciter. Okay, so there's the idea. I hope that's clear enough. I mean, it really is a quite simple thought. I think that it comes down to this idea of there must be a correspondence. So for sentences to be true, there must be a correspondence between the sentence and reality. That's the basic idea. Hope it's clear. I mean, I don't know how to explain it in any more simplistic terms. I think it's a basic kind of a thought. Sometimes people put this in terms of facts. So I think I mentioned this in the book as well. People say it's a fact that Boris Johnson is the Prime Minister. What makes that, or the fact itself contains Boris Johnson, the property of being Prime Minister, and right, facts contain elements to them. It's the thought, real things. Okay, so all right, hopefully that's clear enough. let's now think about what the problem is for presentism. So let's take our sentence again. Dinosaurs existed. The past tense sentence. And the thought is, I mean, there's some written marks on the paper. It's a past tense. But this is true. Nobody wants to deny, even the presentist, of course, doesn't want to deny the past tense sentence, dinosaurs existed. I mean, they think that dinosaurs do not exist, but they don't want to say that it's not true that dinosaurs existed. And as we've seen, or those of you who watched the last video, they want to understand this in terms of the primitive tense operator. Don't worry if you did skip the last video, at least you want to just understand the idea that presentists want to say that that sentence is true. Yeah, don't want to say it's true, I mean, simply that. But now the problem is meant to be, well, how can the presentist explain what makes that sentence true if there aren't supposed to be any dinosaurs? So let's put it like this. The eternalist can easily say, so the eternalist can say this. The eternalist can say star is true because there exist, and that's going to be exist simplicity, I'll not bother writing that in now, but because there exists dinosaurs in the past. That is, they've got some ontological ground, you know, draw a timeline out, and let's suppose here we are in 2020, okay, here's us, and one of us says dinosaurs existed, says our star sentence, and the idea is, well, what makes that sentence true is if we go back again, I can't remember, 500 million BC, I don't know, is that when dinosaurs were around? So here then is a dinosaur, right? There's the dinosaur, and this is made true by the existence of these things there in the past, a real thing in reality. So okay, the existence of dinosaurs in the past ground the truth of the sentence that dinosaurs existed in the present. Okay. So eternalists, in other words, have got a very clear answer to the question, what makes the sentence dinosaurs existed true? The problem is the presentists can't give that account because they don't believe that the past exists, right? In the past, that says. Okay. So the presentist then, really the problem of the Truthmaker sentence is to say star is true because ... What do they say? And the Truthmaker objection is simply there's nothing good that they can say here. There is no way of filling in the dots there, or filling in what follows the dots in a way well, that's plausible. So the Truthmaker objection is that the presentist cannot adequately explain the truth of past tense sentences. That's it. That's the Truthmaker objection. Pretty simple. Now, I want to put this in a little bit more. Let's clear off this canvas. Let's try to construct the argument then, this Truthmaker argument in a bit more detail, and then see what presentists might be able to say in response to it. So, we'll start off with our first, the Truthmaker principle. So, what is true? We'll put it like this. What is true is made true by what exists. Put it like that. Premise 2 then, we'll just put it in terms of the past tense. Past tense sentences, e.g. dinosaurs existed, are true. Okay. Number 3, so past tense sentences are not made true by what exists in the present Alright. Number 4, presentism is the view that only present things exist, or let's put it like this, the only things that exist are things in the present so then we get the conclusion that presentism is false. There's our conclusion. Hopefully you can see the structure of this argument. So it's a valid argument, the conclusion follows. And that means that a presentist must reject one of these premises. Okay, so let's consider which ones they can reject. They could take a very radical line and suppose that past tense sentences, such as dinosaurs existed, are not true. But that's a rather radical line. I mean, no presentist, in fact, wants to take that line that I know of. There is a view, by the way, which we can perhaps talk about in the seminar, and this is often something that people, when they come across this kind of argument, they think of. And the thought is, you say, well, aren't there past traces of dinosaurs that exist? You know, there are fossil records and things like that. Can't it be those that exist in the present that make past tense sentences true? And I suppose that you might be able to defend that kind of a view and say that what makes it true that dinosaurs existed is that there are records of their existence in the present. And we'll see that one suggestion, a more general suggestion that presentists have, is that we can give a reply to the Truthmaker objection in this kind of a way. But if we want to tie it to things like fossil records, then we're going to be unable to explain past tense truths for which there are no current records about. So let's suppose, I'll take as an example something like Caesar had 2,000, I don't know how many hairs do people have on their head, let's say 4,000. Caesar had 4,000 hairs on his head on his 30th birthday. Now there is no record of that remaining in reality. There's no fossil record that we could dig up. There's nothing that would... It might have been true, so it could have been true that Caesar had 4,000 hairs on his head, but there's nothing that exists in reality now which records that fact. It kind of, disappeared as time has gone. And if you take the line that what makes past tense sentences true is the currently available evidence, like fossil records, of their truth, then you're going to have to think that what's true about the past is tied to the records, or the evidence that we've got. So you're going to have to say there's no truth of the matter about whether Caesar had 4,000 hairs on his head. So you can't really take that route. Maybe we can talk more about that in the seminar, but it's just to sort of say you can't tie it to evidence, really. There are some people who have thought that maybe we can, Michael Dummett, for example. But anyway, I'm going to put that to one side for now. Okay, so presentists, let's say, they don't want to deny this premise. They don't want to deny that past tense sentences are true. They don't want to deny this sentence because that's just a statement of what presentism is. So, to deny that is to give up on presentism. So they're left with two options. They either deny the Truthmaker principle itself, or they have to deny that past tense sentences are not made true by what exists in the present. In other words, they have to say that past tense sentences are made true by what exists in the present. And by the way, there we don't mean in terms of fossil records. We have to mean in some metaphysical sense, which I'll try to explain. So okay, here are our two options that we're going to consider, and these are the options that have been taken. Option 1, deny Truthmaker. Option 2, try to argue that past tense sentences are in fact made true by what exists in the present. So, okay, let's clear off this, and we'll write these options down. Option 1, for the presentist, deny Truthmaker. Option 2, argue, or let's just put it in note form as past tense truths made true by present things. Okay, those are our two options. Let's start off with option 1 then, deny Truthmaker. So the Truthmaker principle, as I've put it, Truthmaker principle was true sentences are made true by what exists. The main way of trying to deny Truthmaker principle for the presentists is for them to try to go for a modified version of it that says this: true sentences are made true by, not by what exists, but by what existed, exists, or will exist. Okay. So in that sense I say, well, yeah, and past tense sentences therefore are not made true by what exists, they're made true by what existed. And I'm not going to really look at this option in too much detail, because, I mean, I can't see how this can work for the presentist, because I just don't think that this captures the idea. So remember when I tried to explain Truthmaker, I said that it's somehow true sentences have to be reflected by reality in some sense. You know, they've got to correspond to reality. And the point is, I mean, the presentists, at least the standard presentists, think that, you know, the idea that what existed, it's not existentially committing. You know, we say dinosaurs existed, they want to say that doesn't commit us to the existence of dinosaurs. So, you know, it's almost like saying past tense sentences are made true by things outside of reality. They're made true by stuff which doesn't exist. And I don't understand how that can really work. It's equivalent to just saying, well, it's just to deny the basic intuition or metaphysical thought that lies behind the Truthmaker principle. So I just don't see how this option myself, I don't see how it can work, but perhaps you think there's more to it. I've given some references to some of the literature on this in the book. You can have a look if you're interested in this kind of a way of trying to save presentism from the Truthmaker objection. But at any rate, it hasn't been a particularly popular, although some have tried to argue for it, it hasn't been a particularly popular option for this kind of a reason. So most presentists have ignored or rejected option 1, let's say. So yeah, it looks like the only way to kind of take option 1 and deny Truthmaker is to try to adopt some modified version of it, but I just don't see how this modified version can work, because, you know, let's put it in stark terms. Let's just get rid of this. So in sort of stark terms, to deny the Truthmaker principle, if we now draw out, well, 2020, this is what presentists only think that this, here's us again, only think that the present moment exists. So one of us says dinosaurs existed. They want to say that what makes this true is what existed, and but you know, what existed is a blank. I mean, it's not like it's precisely not like the Eternalist where the past contains things. There's nothing there. So this sentence, on this view, if it's made true by what existed, it's made true by this empty nothingness. And I just don't see how that. How can what's true be made true by an empty nothingness? That's the basic thought. So okay, I'll I'll cross out option 1. I myself don't think it's a viable option. Again, you might disagree. Have a look at the literature. So it means they've got to take option 2. They've got to say that past tense truths are made true by present things. Alright, how do they do this? There are a couple of suggestions in the literature. John Bigelow, for example, has got a particular... Have a look in the book for references anyway. So let's take our sentence again. Dinosaurs existed. The idea, according to one thought, is that although the past disappears, so imagine we're back in 500 million BC. So back then there were dinosaurs. There's a dinosaur. Oh, okay. And right, the thought here is that as time went on, so as time flows, that gets wiped out, and bum, 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 all the other times move along and disappear, as the Presentism says, until we get to 2020. But the thought is, even though that this past time doesn't exist, reality itself, so, okay, the world at this time was such that the fact that dinosaurs exist, that was a fact, and the world somehow retains this fact. Even when dinosaurs disappear, the world is still some containing the fact that dinosaurs existed within it. Dinosaurs existed. It sort of gets retained by reality as it flows. This is meant to be the idea. I mean, I don't know how else to sort of explain this, but it's sort of like the things that are true now get kind of written into reality, and even when the things that are true now stop being true, the fact that they are true, the property of dinosaurs existing, is still contained by the world. That's supposed to be the idea. It seems a bit odd to me, and I don't know what you think of it. There's another option which is basically the same option but with a bit more detail, and this one perhaps is more plausible because it gives more detail. So that is just to say there are these kind of facts that dinosaurs existed which was implanted, or some property of being such that dinosaurs existed is kind of implanted into the world when dinosaurs were about. Okay, so let's talk about the slightly more what we might call it, the more detailed version of this. So on the more detailed version of this, which is suggested by some other people, Kaplan and Sansom, for example, have a look at the references in the textbook for this, is to appeal to things called haexeity. Haexeity. So a haexeity is a particular type of property, and it's supposed to be an individual property. So let's just take, here's me, alright, here's me, and I've got the property, so I've got a number of properties. I've got the property of being however tall I am, I don't know, 6'3", 6'4", something like that. I've got the property of being certain height. I've got the property of having blue eyes. I've got the property of having brown hair. These are all properties that I can share with other things, right? Lots of people have got the property of having blue eyes and so on. But aside from those properties, I'm supposed to have the property of being Ben. That is, not just being somebody with the name Ben, but being the thing, being the person who I am, right? And that's supposed to be an individual property, and this is what's known as a haexeity. So an individual property is the property of being the thing that you are, you know, the very individual that you are, that is. Likewise, you know, if we go back in time then, let's consider a dinosaur. So here's a dinosaur again. Alright, oops. There's our dinosaur. And let's suppose that, let's give the dinosaur a name. Let's call him Dino. And then that dinosaur is also supposed to have the property of being Dino. This doesn't just apply to, conscious things. So we could draw out a lovely table, and this has got the property of being the very table that it is. It's the Hayek-Sayeti, you know. Each table has got its own individual Hayek-Sayeti. Everything that exists is supposed to have these Hayek-Sayeti. We could call this table Terry the table, and then this is going to have the property of being Terry. Okay, and these are all meant to be Hayek-Sayetis of things, properties that things have in virtue of being the things that they are, the individual things that they are. Alright, okay, so some people believe in these things, Hayek-Sayetis, other people deny them, but okay, let's suppose that they exist. Now the key thing here is the following thought. Do things have to exist in order for properties to exist? So some people also think that properties can exist independently of being instantiated, and for example, consider the property of being a unicorn. So that's not a Hayek-Sayeti, that's just a general property. Lots of things could possess the property, but there could be many unicorns, so it's not a Hayek-Sayeti, it's not an individual property, but let's just consider that one first of all. So as it happens, there are no unicorns in existence, so there is nothing that instantiates the property of being a unicorn. Nonetheless, some people think that the property of being a unicorn still exists. Properties don't have to be instantiated to exist, so goes the idea. And this is often tied to a kind of Aristotelian view, according to which some people think Aristotle thought this. So, okay, here's the idea then. The properties of being certain, the Hayek-Sayetistic properties, the property of being Ben, or of being Terry the table, of being Dino the dinosaur, these properties can also exist even when the things themselves do not exist. That goes the idea. And in fact, what happens is, so let's try and draw the presentist point of view again. Oh, I'll have to put Dino the dinosaur back in. So okay, here we are in, that's the dinosaur. Oh gee, they're getting worse and worse. Anyway, there's our dinosaur in 500 million BC. And right, what happens as time flows is, so here is Dino the dinosaur having the property of being Dino. So that very thing, that's the individual. That's not the property of being a dinosaur, to be clear. It's the property of being that particular dinosaur, Dino the dinosaur. And what happens is, well, I don't know, something happens. A meteorite hits the Earth, or maybe it just dies of natural causes. But the time goes on, and okay, the dinosaurs get wiped out. We get to 2020, but the idea is that floating around somewhere, it's retained, the property of being Dino is still about. The Hayek-Sayetistic property of being Dino the dinosaur, despite the fact that there's nothing that instantiates it, i.e. Dino himself or herself does not exist, the property of being Dino does still exist in 2020. It came into existence at the point when Dino, him or herself, came into existence. Dino died, but the property of being Dino is still there, and it's still there in 2020. So goes the thought, when we say dinosaurs existed, what makes it true? Well, it's the existence of these Hayek-Sayetistic properties, the properties of being Dino. Right, so there goes, that's the idea. Notice that therefore what makes past tense sentences true is still something that exists in the present moment, because these properties are supposed to exist in the present moment. Hey presto, we've got an answer to the Truthmaker problem. We deny that past tense truths are made true by or past tense truths are not made true by present things. We say, oh no, past tense truths are made true by present things. In particular, they're made true by the existence of these properties, which came about when the things in the past existed. Right, so there we go. There's the there's the main response that's being given. I wonder what you make of this. I'm not going to say any more about it, I don't think. I think I'm going to leave things at that. I mean, if I'm being honest, I have to think that this is, to my mind, a bit of a desperate response. I do want to quickly mention, notice though here that what they're not saying, maybe I'll quickly mention the other option. So I mentioned it earlier, but perhaps maybe you think that, no, I'll tell you what, I won't. I'll leave it for the seminar. I was gonna talk about the idea that perhaps we can say fossil records rather than these Hayek-Sciatistic properties. I've already expressed briefly why I think that reply is not going to work either, but we can talk about that in the seminar. So okay, I'll leave it at that. What do you make of this Truthmaker objection is the main question. Do you think it works? Do you think it's decisive against presentism? What do you think about the options that the presentists have in responding to it? Do you think option 1 might work? What do you make of this option 2? There are other things that presentists can say, but they're all variations on a theme. They try to provide a kind of metaphysical record of the past that exists here in the present. Oh, and the last thing that I want to say, in the second video, sorry, in the third video, the one that I said was optional, I made a distinction between primitivist presentist and ersatzer presentist. Ersatzer presentists, in fact, think that their view is immune to the Truthmaker objection. I haven't spoken about that here in this video, but again, we can talk about that in the seminar as well. Really, the key things for you to have understood this week then, the first video on how to understand, or the objection on the way to frame the debate between presentists and eternalists, so the idea that there isn't a substantive debate. The second video where we give the response in terms of existence simpliciter, and this final video explaining what the Truthmaker objection is and giving the basic response that the presentist might or have tried to give to it. So those are the key things to bear in mind. The book, read through the chapter of the book, it should reinforce some of this, and I'll give some extra readings, suggested readings as well, which you can have a look at. Alright, thanks very much, and I'll see you in the seminar.